I hope they got the fact that something that's getting overlooked, which is the artistic side and the musical side of recording music. I'm really not that technical, because in the very beginning I just fell in love with music, and that's what I wanted to do, to be able to be part of creating that music. Which means, you know what orchestras sound like, you know what operas sound like, and of course I took what my experience through that over into recording pop music, because I know what is possible emotionally. So it was to try and, I hope they got the fact that they can create things, new things on their own without relying on technology that's just sort of given to them. They get lazy, and probably it's because it's great fun to actually try and manufacture stuff yourself and be unique, and you still can do that. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I'm going to say yes. Let's go back to basics. I recently did I say recently, about 2 years ago, I did a commercial with a film director, Tony Kaye, but it went up into like Manchester, and for different sort of dance sequences and very sort of weird avant-garde things with the Winter Man. But Tony didn't want to pre-record the music, and they weren't, which would have been the easy thing to do, just film to the track and mime. Well, they were all the actors in it were amateurs. They weren't professional singers. And one kid was just found on, wandering down the road. So, but you couldn't play a click track, and you couldn't play anything because it would have picked up on his vocal mic.
Right.
So we basically had to do that as like a tempo for him, and give him a sort of a beat from a little cassette machine to try and get him in pitch. But he'd do the whole sequence of the song, and he'd be filmed walking down the road, and then it would go to more men on another set, singing. There would be 10 men singing the song under the same circumstances. And we had a sort of template that we worked out with the click track to make sure it was sort of going to fit. And then it went into like 30 people, and then there was one sequence when they were coming down the mountain, and the microphones had to be dispersed in the undergrowth to record them. So it was almost an impossible thing to do, and that's one of the reasons I sort of did it, because it was impossible. And there was one instance where we were filming in another location, and a van broke down and pulled up, and there was a little pop band in there. And Tony, the director, said, let's do a sequence with this little pop band. So we played them the song, which is a Carole King song. It's a very, very famous song, which James Taylor made a hit with. So we played them the song, and so the sequence then, we played them the click so they could get the tempo. And then they just sat in their van. We quickly mic'd them up, and they sing like a little sequence. And the shot went into them, so that was spontaneous, and that was all included in the advert.
Wow.
And then we went to Abbey Road and overdubbed an orchestra onto it, because and slotted. Obviously, when it was edited, it was slotted in, and all our fingers were crossed. So all the segments just actually stuck together, and it lasted its 59 seconds, and it all worked out, thank God. But it was just natural. It wasn't pre-recorded, and Tony just wanted that natural thing. It was a huge advert, All the people we worked with were incredibly good. They were all artists in their own right. They weren't, new unknown people. They were contracted to EMI Records, had been signed, had done an artist test. So I can't, off the top of my head, all the new bands that were coming in. Music, I mean, there was Jerry and the Pacemakers, there was Freddie and the Dreamers, and there was Billy J. Kramer, and there was all these other bands which were Brian Epstein's stable. And there was Cilla Black. In fact, I ended up recording Cilla Black, and there was another guy called Matt Monroe. But, the great guitarists, there was, I remember John Barry being a session guitarist, the film arranger. And I remember John, and there was a few other of them. The guitarists started off as session guys at that time.
Right.
And there was the guy from Yes.
Okay.
He was a session guy, and a lot of them were just session musicians. But I mean, obviously, the Clapton came out of that. Clapton came out of it. But there were so many great artists and a lot of great talent. We're constantly working with talent.
Right.